Noah stepped off the bus into a silence he hadn't expected. The town seemed smaller than he remembered, almost like a scaled-down model of his childhood. The asphalt was warmer than before, but the smells were the same, a mix of dust, linden blossoms, and something unspoken, maybe nostalgia. As he walked along the old streets, it felt like retracing his own footsteps. There, by the building now painted a sandy color they used to play football, there were no nets, no lines, just two large stones serving as goalposts. They would play until their knees were scraped, until the dust rose so high it looked like fog. Memories rushed in as if someone had turned on a tap. Mira always insisted on playing fair. Elias was the goalkeeper, though he hated it. He preferred analyzing the game over running. Luca drew tactics with a stick in the dirt, and Noah, he ran the fastest as if the ball were escaping into the future. Farther down the street, under an old chestnut tree, they used to set up a wooden stand and sell lemonade. Mira would laugh the loudest, shouting, "Ice-cold lemonade for a hot day." Passers-by mostly ignored them, but sometimes an older woman would buy a glass just to make them happy. That 1 dinar was enough to buy 2 ice creams, or 3 if they were lucky. He passed the school. The doors were rusted, the windows broken. The attic, their attic, still stood above it all like a guardian of the past. He remembered sneaking up the fire escape and peering through an old telescope. Elias always knew where to point it. "Look at that light," he'd say. "Maybe it started its journey toward us 100 years ago. It's only reaching us now." His feet carried him to the end of the street. His heart raced when he saw his old house. It was in ruins. The walls were crumbling, the roof caved in, grass pushing through where the hallway tiles used to be. He stood where his mother had kissed him goodbye before they had to leave. He hadn't known it would be the last time. He sat in the shade, leaning against the only intact wall. Closing his eyes, the sound of wind through the cracks of the house reminded him of voices he'd long stopped hearing. More than 20 years had passed, yet in that moment, time collapsed into a single point: childhood, departure, return. Everything narrowed down to now. When he opened his eyes, something glinted in the sunlight a few steps away. He stood slowly and approached. Among the rubble and grass, he saw a tin box, partially rusted but unmistakably theirs. Kneeling, he carefully pulled it out. His heart pounded like it used to when they'd sprint across the meadow after breaking a neighbor's window. Inside the box were photographs, 4 faces frozen in time, 4 children with mud-streaked knees and smiles wider than the world. There were also scraps of paper, signed notes, and a message written in shaky handwriting: "If we ever get lost, may this box remind us of who we were." His hands trembled. His vision blurred. There had been 4 of them. Now he didn't know where the others were. The war had scattered them like wind scattered leaves. But this box, this moment, was a call, not to nostalgia, but to action. A decision was already forming in him. He would bring them back. Or at least try. Noah spent hours scouring social media, tracing the faint trails of people he'd once known. Mira, now a teacher in Graz, avoided the spotlight but still left traces. He found her Facebook profile, but it was locked. He'd have to find another way to reach her. Meanwhile, he photographed the old streets and houses, posting them online in hopes someone would recognize her name. In a local group, he dedicated an entire post, "Does anyone know where Mira is?" He shared old pictures, the 4 of them, grinning in the sun, and wrote, "Nostalgia. Old friends long lost. If anyone knows anything about Mira, please reach out." 2 days later, he got a reply. Someone mentioned Graz. Someone had seen Mira at a school exhibition. Noah didn't wait. He took the next train to Graz. The city was alive, but to Noah, everything felt the same. The smell of coffee, the sound of passing cars, people on bicycles. He tried to recall Mira's stories about her life in Graz, but they were distant, almost dreamlike. With no leads, he began asking strangers. He imagined what Mira might look like now. Did she still wear her golden braid? Luck was on his side. A local teacher recognized her, mentioning Mira taught art classes for children. The next day, Noah took a bus to the school. The building was old but beautiful, with a courtyard reminiscent of their childhood. Nervous but hopeful, he stepped into the classroom, and there she was. Mira, speaking to a group of children. Her eyes were the same, clear and attentive, as if no time had passed. When she saw him, her heart stopped. His name had been a whisper in her thoughts, but now he was real. She paused, stared, then smiled, the same smile she'd had since childhood, full of memories, full of nostalgia. "Noah?" she asked, as if she couldn't believe it. "Yes, it's me," he replied, his words tangled in emotion. "Time passed, but I never stopped thinking about you." Mira hesitated, her eyes filled with sorrow and joy. "You thought of me. How could I forget? There were 4 of us together in everything. Where have you been?" "Here," she said. But life was too chaotic. There was no time for anything else, though everyone left you, Elias. "I have to find him," Noah said firmly. "That's why I came. I found the box. There were 4 of us, and I need to bring him back. The war tore us apart, but I want to fix that." Mira studied him and realized his search for Elias was more than nostalgia. It was a calling, something he couldn't ignore. She knew he'd go, but how? Where to start? "I know where he went," she said softly, "before he disappeared, but it's a long journey. Are you ready?" Noah nodded. "Yes, I'm ready. We'll find him together." After reconnecting and reminiscing, Mira and Noah spent days in Graz, talking, laughing, and quietly reflecting. But one thought nagged at Noah: where was Elias? They sat by a riverside cafe. Mira stirred her coffee, staring at the foam as if searching for answers. "The last time I heard about him was maybe 8, 9 years ago," she said. "A colleague from Sarajevo mentioned him, said he worked at a refugee center, translating, teaching kids sometimes." Noah frowned, and after that, nothing. He vanished, like he withdrew from the world. Noah looked down at his glass of water. He was always like that. Silence was his home. The next morning, they left for Sarajevo. On the night train, watching moonlit mountains, Noah remembered their attic conversations. "You know what Elias once said?" Mira whispered, smiling sadly. "If I'm ever alone, don't worry. It's not a punishment. It's my peace." Sarajevo greeted them with overcast skies and drizzling rain. They went straight to the humanitarian center, where an older man, gray-browed, scarred, confirmed he'd known Elias. "He was the quiet one," the man said, leaning against the hallway wall. "Came here, helped mostly with kids, knew how to listen, and when he spoke, it was like time stopped. He left suddenly, 10 years ago, but he left something behind." He led them to a small room. In a drawer lay a leather-bound journal worn with time. Mira opened it carefully. Inside were sketches, thoughts, memories, and a page that tightened Noah's throat. The stars haven't vanished. They're just no longer seen from the same place. On the last page, in trembling handwriting, Elias had written, "Malopolj at the road's end, where the mountains are silent and people still know how to listen to the wind." The journey to Malopolj was hard. The asphalt faded after the 3rd bend, giving way to forest trails and rocky cliffs. They left their car behind and continued on foot, backpacks heavy, souls quiet. The village greeted them in near silence. Elders sat outside their homes, barely glancing at the strangers. Only when they asked about Elias did an old woman rise. Her black shawl framed eyes that remembered too much. "Elias, he was here, lived in the old schoolhouse, taught the children. Didn't speak much, but he showed them how to read the sky." She led them down a path behind the village to a crumbling building covered in ivy. Inside one of the classrooms, Elias had made his home. No electricity, no modern comforts, just a desk, a bed, a shelf of books, and stacks of paper. On the wall, between 2 cracks, hung a photograph of the 4 of them. On the table, a note. "If you've come this far, it means you still believe. I believe too, in you, in us, in what we had, that it didn't have to be lost." The old woman told them Elias had gone even farther, to a monastery above the valley. He rarely came down, but villagers sometimes saw him fetching water from the river. They entered the valley as the sun dipped low. The monastery was hidden among rocks, almost invisible. The door was open. There, in the shadows and silence, stood Elias, older with a long beard, his gaze no longer avoiding reality but embracing it. "Noah," he said softly, his voice deeper but familiar. "Mira." For seconds, no one moved, then an embrace, quiet, fierce, wordless, because some things don't need words. That evening, they sat outside the monastery. Elias offered them wild mint tea. They watched the stars, just like old times. "Why did you leave?" Noah asked quietly. Elias shrugged. "I was broken, and I knew what was shattered in me couldn't be fixed among people. I had to find silence first to forgive myself." "And now," Mira asked, "now you're here." Silence settled again, this time a silence of presence and hope. Under the starry sky, like on the school attic long ago, 3 friends sat in a circle. One had been lost, now found. One had become a teacher, a beacon. And one had been a seeker who never gave up. There had been 4 of them. One was still missing. But now they knew together they could find him too. The 3 of them, Noah, Mira, and Elias, stood outside a modern conference hall in Ljubljana. Luka, the last of their forgotten quartet, had become something none of them could have imagined back then, a name in the world of innovation. His company, specializing in sustainable technology, was a regional leader. His face was on billboards in magazines. Unlike Elias, who'd chosen silence, Luka had built a life in the spotlight. "I can't believe we're about to see him," Mira whispered, adjusting her bag strap as they approached the hall. "Do you think he'll recognize us?" Elias asked, slightly nervous. He'd buttoned his shirt to the top despite the heat. "We won't tell him right away," Noah said. "I'll ask him something he couldn't have forgotten." The hall was packed. Luka stood on stage, confident, eloquent, his hands moving with his words. He spoke about wind energy, new projects in Scandinavia, shaping the future. Noah watched him but didn't see a man in a suit. He saw the boy who'd drawn football tactics in the dirt, who'd whispered plans on the attic while peering through a telescope at light that had only just arrived. When the lecture ended, the audience applauded. Luka bowed, thanked them, and stepped down. In the networking area, he moved through the crowd, exchanging cards, shaking hands with strangers. Noah approached. Mira and Elias lingered behind, pretending to be curious observers. "Mr. Luka Marchand," Noah asked. Luka turned and nodded. "I've followed your work for a while. I'm curious, how do you balance big projects with staying true to what you once loved? How do you ensure success doesn't come at the cost of who you were?" Luka smiled politely. "It's a process. Success is measured long-term, but I always stay faithful to the idea that started it all." Noah nodded, then locked eyes with him. "And if you had to choose, the telescope, the old attic, and 3 friends, or success?" Luka froze. His thoughts seemed to stall, his gaze piercing deeper past Noah's face. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at Noah, then at the woman beside him, then at the man nervously twisting a ring on his finger. His lips parted slightly. "No, it can't be, Noah," Noah smiled. "Have I changed that much?" Luka stepped forward, almost disbelieving, and pulled him into a fierce hug. Mira was already tearing up as she joined them. Elias hung back at first, but when the group embraced, he couldn't resist. In the middle of the crowded hall, 4 silhouettes, weathered by time but still standing, were one heart again. "I can't believe it. How did you find me?" Luka asked later, sitting in the hotel bar. "The time capsule," Noah said, "in our old street near my house. I found it when I returned." "That tin box," Luka laughed, then grew serious. "I thought the war destroyed everything." "It almost did," Mira said softly, "but enough remained to remind us." Elias added, "Your picture was there, and the message not to forget." Luka nodded. In the silence that followed, each carried their own version of pain, their own shadows, but together now, the light was stronger. "You know," Luca said, staring into his glass. "I always looked for you, but I was afraid of what I'd find, so I stopped. I turned to the future because I didn't know how to return to the past." "Maybe it's not about returning," Noah said. "Maybe it's about bringing it with us, being people who remember." Mira looked at him and smiled. "Yes, and who aren't afraid to find each other again." Outside, rain began to patter. Through the window, Ljubljana glowed, modern and ancient, just like them. 4 people who once drew dreams in the dust, now piecing them back together. Luca pulled out his phone and showed them a picture. "You know the worst part," he said. "I've kept this photo for years. The 4 of us in front of the school, grinning like fools. I never deleted it." "Then you never really lost us," Elias said quietly. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of everything they hadn't had time to say. And that, the presence, the shared glances, the togetherness, was what they'd been searching for. Noah knew they were finally whole again, no longer just fragments. As they walked down the street, step by step, everything felt familiar. The building with missing windows, the trees now taller than their memories, but the scent of the air, the scent of childhood, was the same. They exhaled in unison, as if only days had passed, not decades. They passed the places where they'd once run, where they'd lined up for their first day of school, where they'd shared secrets and tucked dreams into boxes they believed even time couldn't erase. When they reached the old school threshold, they stopped. The building looked abandoned now, part of its soul lost to oblivion. But inside them were memories that couldn't be wiped away, like indelible marks on old books. They pushed open the creaking doors and stepped inside. The halls were quiet. It was surreal to stand there, their adult bodies echoing the youthful energy they'd once carried. They remembered their classrooms. Mira stood before the math room, recalling the teacher explaining formulas while they scribbled notes under their desks. Luca wandered to the history class, where they daydreamed about heroes and rebels. Elias, the quiet shadow of those years, simply stood, occasionally smiling at the realization that he was back among the places that had shaped him. "Remember when we skipped class?" Mira said with a grin. "We ran through the courtyard before the teacher caught us. Or when we tried to avoid rewriting our homework," Noah added, their laughter merging like old times. They moved through the rooms, recalling teachers, classmates, words that had seemed ordinary then but were now part of something timeless. The last place they visited was the attic. They climbed the stairs slowly, just as they had as children. When they reached the top, they paused and looked around. Years had passed, but the details remained. The space smelled of dust, but it was more than that. It was their world, untouched by time. Noah walked to an old cabinet. Inside, behind forgotten things, lay the telescope. He picked it up carefully as if it were treasure and turned to his friends. "Remember?" "Of course," Mira said, smiling. "We used to watch the stars with this. Now we're here, among the things that always reminded us what mattered." Elias studied the telescope, then said, "Sometimes it's hard to believe so much time has passed." Beneath their fingertips, the attic became a bridge between then and now. The children who'd sat here, gazing at stars, were now adults. But this place held the echoes of who they'd been and who they'd become. They didn't need to speak. The telescope, the attic, it all came full circle. And just as they'd once peered through the lens, they now looked through the memories that bound them, together, as if they'd never left.